want to know who I am? Folks call me the Bone Man. Ain't my real name, but it's the one that stuck. Tonight on Requiem Radio. There's a little known law in music, older than counterpoint, older than theory, that says sound, once made, never truly disappears. It echoes, it lingers, and sometimes it comes back, twisted. So what happens when an instrument's not just a vessel for song, but a grave for a voice that won't stay dead? Turn your ears to the frost-bitten halls of an old conservatory in southern Poland. We're about to open a violin case that should have stayed shut. This story is definitely not for the squeamish, and it's called The Screaming Violin.
The violin appeared in January. No name, no label, no note. Just a black case sitting on the stone steps outside the Krakow Conservatory, untouched by snow despite the storm the night before. No one claimed it. The director handed it off to a student named Matilda Musica. She was quiet, diligent, lived alone, and played with precision and no emotion. She specialized in modern repertoire. Penderecki, Schnittke, and Ligeti were her favorites. She loved the pieces that made other students wince. When she opened the case, she didn't ask questions. She just nodded and said, "Yes, I'll use this now." The violin was old, with dark varnish and slight warping near the scroll. There was a scratch just under the bridge that looked almost like lettering. The tone was remarkable, deep, crisp, full of air and friction, like a human breath pressed through a crack in a wall. The other students noticed that the sound seemed to linger after rehearsals. People swore they could still hear it. Echoes in the stairwells, notes in the walls. Even in the silences, something hung there. Then came the bleeding. First, there was a nosebleed in the practice room as a violinist collapsed after rehearsal. A harpist went home with a ringing in her ears and woke up the next morning with blood soaking into her pillow. Doctors couldn't explain it, and the school blamed it on stress. Matilda was never affected. She practiced longer than anyone, going for hours alone in room 7, playing the same lines over and over until her fingertips split open. She never noticed the screams. During one rehearsal for the Ligeti concerto, a faculty member got up and walked out after less than 2 minutes. He said it felt like something was scratching behind his eyes. A student dropped out. Another stopped playing violin altogether. The sound wasn't music anymore. It was something alive. They started researching the violin, and one name came up. Magda Czerniaka. Magda was a luthier from the late 17th century and one of the only documented women to build violins in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. She lived just outside Krakow and was burned at the stake in 1694 after being accused of witchcraft. Local legend said she mixed bone dust into her varnish and that she made her last violin on the eve of her death. They said it screamed while she burned. No one at the conservatory made that connection officially, but the rumor spread. And then came the concert. A visiting composer had come from Munich to teach a master class, and Matilda had been selected to play Ligeti. She took the stage, tuned calmly, and raised that violin to her shoulder. It began quietly. The first movement went as expected. In the second, she started to push it a little bit with double stops, microtones, and jarring intervals. Then something changed, not in what she played, but in what came out. There was a second voice, a high overtone just above human pitch, and sounded like a woman screaming underwater, thin, wet, and endless. It climbed as she played and followed every shift, every turn. The lights flickered and people began to stir in their seats. The air seemed to bend, the audience writhed in their seats, some weeping, some clutching their heads. A man bit clean through his own tongue. One student carved the word "no" into his forearm with his pen. A professor began crying and clawed at his own ears and fell to the floor. A woman seized and fell out of the balcony. And yet, Matilda didn't stop and didn't even blink. She just played until her fingers bled through the strings. Security was called and she was removed by force. The guards said she fought like something with too many joints. The violin was pried from her hands, and that was the last time she was seen alive. The visiting composer was later committed to a psychiatric hospital. They found Matilda's body 3 days later in the crawl space above room 7. She was in a cavity barely 2 feet high with her hands folded over her chest. Each fingertip was worn to the bone and her jaw cracked open, both sides dislocated with her face frozen in a silent scream. The violin was gone and has not been seen since. Room 7 was sealed off, but students still talk. They say if you walk past room 7 at night, you can still hear her practicing. They say that during heavy snows, when the winds howl in off the Carpathians, you can hear a thin, screeching tone filter through the walls. It is not a note, not really. It's a scream. And if you hear it once, you will never stop hearing it, even in silence.
You've been listening to Requiem Radio, where music bleeds into the supernatural, and that was the Screaming Violin. I tried to warn you it was gonna be a rough one. Matilda didn't flinch when the audience literally went to pieces. She didn't stop even when the blood started flowing. They say she played till her fingers peeled like old bark. And when she finally screamed back, the violin took it in like breath. Now she's gone, but the violin ain't. It's still out there somewhere. And if you hear it singing, don't follow the sound. That music don't want an audience. It wants a body. Ain't gonna be no more tonight. Y'all rest easy. And don't let the dark drive you home.